My name is Jason Augsburger, a proud member of UAW Local 2075, where I serve as a skilled trades carpenter. Like all of you, I show up every day ready to build, to fight for fair wages, strong benefits, safe working conditions, and the respect our labor deserves. We're all in this together, whether you're on the line in auto, aerospace, or any other industries the UAW represents. Today, I'm honored to introduce and speak with one of our own who's stepping forward with real vision and courage, Greg Mooney. Greg, thank you for being here and for putting it all on the line to lead us forward. Let's get started with some questions about your family,
Certainly.
your journey into the union, your leadership experience, your business background, and what finally convinced you that now is the time to run for International UAW President. Can you start by telling us a bit about your family? As a husband and father, how has your family life shaped your perspective and the challenges facing the working class families in America today?
Yeah, most certainly. I have a daughter. She's 17, soon to be 18, and going off to college. So me and my wife are going to be empty nesters here pretty soon. My wife, she's a children's pastor at Lima First Church here in Lima. She also serves as the missions director. And so we have always tried to instill the mindset of servant leadership with our daughter and to serve those around us. So, over the course of our family, there's been times where we've been on hard times. I was on workers' comp for a period of time. I've been on unemployment. I've dealt with, getting like Obamacare or having to get food stamps to feed my daughter early on. And those are challenges that, a lot of the workers are facing right now with the way the workforce is going and the massive layoffs and stuff. On top of that, I serve each month at my local prison through our church ministry, trying to encourage others and put them on the right path to God. But my wife, as she goes out and serves, both locally, regionally, and internationally, we come across people that are, impoverished or dealing with some real problems. And so I've always tried to support her in that, to give money, to serve, and, to try to have a heart of, servant leadership and giving. And this most recent Christmas, my wife, she came up with a way to feed, kids in need in middle school and high school because they want to get a lunch over, Christmas break because they didn't have school meals. So we put together 580 bags here in Allen County to feed 580 students at 10 separate schools. And our local union partnered with that. And so, I'm trying to, bring that mindset of servitude to our local and to pass it forward in our community.
Greg, you're a member of Local 2147. Tell us about your UAW involvement and how you support your members.
Yeah. So I serve as the recording secretary, as you mentioned earlier. We're a smaller union, but I try to serve wherever I can. During our last contract negotiations, I put the highlighter together for everyone involved with the negotiations with General Dynamics. I went through and, would pull information and get them data and stuff while they're doing contract negotiations. Again, I serve as a officer within the union. I volunteer my time to be on the CAB Council and go each month. I am starting up the process of starting the chaplaincy program for our local to help out our membership. As I mentioned earlier, our local this past Christmas partnered with, my church to help feed, impoverished kids. But we also set up things last year. So there's a food shelter in the spring that we did a food drive for called Our Daily Bread. So those are all things that I've been, involved with in trying to help our local any way I can. Also, what kind of got me on the path started on this process of running for International UAW President was I put together a actual AI model for our local to help us win grievances and to push back against, the foolishness of the company. And so, anything I can do to help our union, I do it.
Greg, can you walk us through your work history? What roles have you held in your career, and both inside and outside the UAW? And how have those experiences prepared you to lead the international union?
So, first, I have a degree in political science, so I studied business, public administration, those type of things. And early on in my education career, I actually was studying to be an educator, a high school history teacher. But life had other plans. But starting off when I entered the workforce, I started doing sales for swimming pools, and then I moved on to the construction side and installing in-ground swimming pools. So that gave me a lot of experience on what our skilled trades face, doing carpentry, running electrical, plumbing, concrete, all those type of things. In my mid-20s, then I got promoted to the in-ground pool manager. And so I was responsible for selling $50,000, $100,000 swimming pools to customers. And then I had to install it. So then I had to lead a team and deal with contractors and negotiate with that, and deal with our suppliers and negotiate. Unfortunately, I got hurt on the job and I tore my bicep completely off, tore my rotator cuff, and herniated 2 discs in my neck. So I was off for about 5-6 years, had several procedures to get back in the workforce. So that gave me certainly a perspective of workplace safety and why we got to fight for that, and then the bureaucracy that workers have to fight through just so they can return to work, and the impact that has financially. And then moving from there, when I re-entered the workforce, I worked at my local church as the media director, and then after a couple of years, I started my own business called Reach Media Designs, and what I focused on was marketing, website design, that type of stuff for businesses, small business, and nonprofits. So I did stuff for large franchises for Verizon Wireless, universities, that type of stuff, putting together content for them. And so I had to negotiate, with whether I'm buying advertising time and with the customer there high value things. So I've been doing negotiations my entire life. From there, I began teaching at a local trade school in the area of IT and technology for about a year. And then right before COVID hit, I moved on working at a local university in the education technology department. And so that gave me a real feel of what our educators face, because one, I was actually one for a little over a year, but then supporting educators and the challenges they face in higher education. And after that period of time there, I was able to move on to General Dynamics and enter the workforce as far as manufacturing goes. And so I have a very eclectic and unique background where my work history represents, skilled trades, education, and manufacturing. But I think that gives me a unique edge as far as what businesses are facing and what the majority of our membership experiences.
Greg, what initially brought you into the manufacturing industry and the UAW? Tell us about your career experiences that built your understanding of the daily realities facing workers on the shop floor.
So I'm going to focus on my most recent work history. So before working at General Dynamics, I was working at a university, as I just mentioned. And going through COVID, I was like one of a handful of people that had to be there every day, working 50, 60 hours a week. And I never got any gratitude or anything. And after working there 2 years, they were lucky enough to give me a 2% raise as a thank you. But the way that the structure worked there was when you are in a different tiers, that determined how much you paid in health insurance. So because I got that 2% raise, it kicked me to the next tier. So I ended up having to pay more money out for health insurance, which means that the raise that I got for my good work and service actually was a pay cut because I had to pay more in health insurance. And I mean, I complained and, did my due diligence, but they're like, sorry, tough, you have to take it. And I'm like, I have to take a pay cut. That's absurd. And then when the administration, the president of the university retired, there was a gap there. And the communications director for the university is at, I don't know how else to put it, but, she wasn't a fan of mine. She felt threatened with the ideas and stuff I pushed out. So she eliminated my job. And leading up to that, she didn't communicate, didn't give me any feedback. And I'm like, hey, I'd love to have feedback. I want to do better. I want to be a good employee. And then, instead of doing that and just being an adult and having a conversation, she sent me down the path of a personal improvement plan through HR. And I kept all the documents. It's like a stack about that thick of what I did wrong in a 3-month period. So no one should have to face that, and that really persuaded or changed my opinion about unions and the workforce. And then as I've worked at General Dynamics, just seeing the lies, the manipulation that management does, the bureaucracy, the lack of care and effort that, maybe it's not at your workplace, but where we're at, where there's just no care and no concern for safety. I mean, just asinine stuff that we have to deal with. And so just experiencing that, I haven't been in the union more than like 4 years, but, a lot of the guys up north, I mean, that's in management and leadership for our union. I mean, they're like stepped away, for 15, 20 years. They're not living that grind every day and experiencing that impact that it has on your finances and the way it affects your family and stuff. Where I have, I'm living that right now. And so it's important that, these things help shape you to be a better leader and to lead our union. Because I'm doing it right now. I'm living it. I'm experiencing it. I haven't been up in Detroit for 20 years and part of the establishment.
Why did you decide to run for International UAW President in 2026? What specific concerns about the current direction of this union, such as financial stewardship, organizing efforts, or preparing for the AI that's coming down the pike and industry changes, motivated you to step forward?
So a little over about a year and a half ago, I started looking at AI because there was all this craze. And so I started to learn more about it. I actually started making my own AI on my own computer. From there are some shenanigans going on with the company against our union and our local, and it made me mad. So I'm like, well, I'm going to create my own AI to push back against the company to help our union. And so I built this out and had a working prototype and stuff that was successful. I shared it with the International Union. It's got to go through the lawyers and all that stuff. But here you go. We got to be on the ball with this. We can't be waiting. And it took like 3 months before I got a response. Well, in that 3-month time, there was a thing called the Big Beautiful Bill that got passed this past summer. And in there was a provision that prevented states from regulating AI for a period of 10 years. So it was just run roughshod. And other unions, such as the Teamsters, were pushing back against this. So again, I brought this to my international rep, and again, they didn't do anything. And during this whole time with the Big Beautiful Bill, the UAW never spoke up. They never mentioned it. And matter of fact, there was a social media post from the Teamsters that was talking about it on the same day that Sean Fain was endorsing the mayoral candidate from New York City. And it just made me mad because we're letting identity politics rule our union instead of actually tackling the challenges that our workers are facing. I mean, AI is going to impact our white collar jobs and our materials jobs immediately in the next year or two. And then before it'll hit the manufacturing sector, but we have nothing in place. The union's not even talking about it. And when I call the union out, they're like, oh, we got to put on the committee. What type of leadership is that? And moreover, the UAW sold, I don't know, $250 million worth of stock to help pay for the strikes for the big three. Well, instead of reinvesting that money back into the strike fund when they didn't strike, they let it sit out there for a year. And if they would have reinvested that money, we would, instead of paying 2.5 hours each month in union dues, we'd only be paying 2. So every member in the UAW right now is paying more in dues because of the mismanagement of Sean Fain and our leadership. And that's just one area. I mean, you talk about AI. They've spent $40 million in the past couple of years for recruitment for the UAW. And our numbers are flat. Where other unions are growing as far as numbers and stuff go, ours is flat or declining. I haven't got the latest numbers, but I mean, we're somewhere around 375 to 380,000 dues paying members right now. And I mean, where did that $40 million go? I mean, times aren't great, but they're not the worst they could be. And we're dipping into the emergency fund. And I fully expect that every union local will be on strike in the next 5 years, 5 to 7 years. So what is the plan here? What is the play? Why aren't we being good stewards of the strike fund? Why aren't we, preparing for this and coming up with ways to lead our membership through the largest disruption in human history when it comes to labor? So that's why I stood up and fought, and I'm putting myself out here. And I'm not taking anyone's money. I'm paying for my campaign myself. I'm doing this myself. Every letter that's going out, I hand wrote it and paid for the stamp. It's going to your local. So because this is so important, because if we don't do something, what legacy and what future does our kids have and our grandkids?
Okay, Greg, you've described yourself as a follower of Jesus, a conservative, a proud American. How do these core parts of your identity influence the way you approach union leadership and advocacy for UAW members?
So first and foremost, that comes to the discussion is, you say you're a conservative and automatically people's like, oh, Mega Greg and all this other stuff. Well, I identify as a conservative and not a Republican, first and foremost. Second, I say that I'm a conservative because I believe that my provision comes from God, where the liberal perspective is that it comes from the government or man. And so my faith is, the foundation of my livelihood and who I am as a person. And so I can't accept that. So that's why I say I'm conservative. But more than that, with the experiences I've shared with you, I more likely line up with a Kennedy era Democrat than what I do with the modern Democrat Party. Things have shifted so much, things are so bifurcated, and everything is people's at each other's throats for everything. And that's just not me. I believe that we should partner with whoever that's going to help the UAW win. I think that America should take priority in everything that we do as a union. I think if it can't be made here and if it can't be grown here, it should be tariffed so that we can bring up equal pay. And, it's kind of hard to compete when you're dealing with slave labor in China, right? So that's the reason why I think tariffs are important, because it's going to equal that. So they're not going to close a business and ship it over to China to save 2 cents on an item instead of just making it here in the United States. So, that's where I'm at. Whatever we can do to bring back jobs, to punish those companies and to hold them accountable is what I'm for. I'm for America winning. I'm for our leaders winning. I'm for the UAW winning. And again, I don't care who I got to partner with. I'm going to do it because it's that important. Everyone wants to pick a side and that the other side has to lose for me to win. And I just think that's poor leadership coming out right now, because it's not helping. It's throwing fuel to the fire and causing more division instead of bringing us together in solidarity.
Okay. Greg, you've spoken about the profound threat AI poses to jobs in your local and across the UAW. Drawing from your own background and observations on the shop floor, why do you believe bold, innovative leadership is needed to push back against automation and AI and secure our members' future? And what is your plan to combat this?
Yeah. So first and foremost, we need to start getting some type of CBA provision in there to help protect our jobs and kind of stall off the changes or slow down the changes that's going to be affecting the workforce. The other thing that we need to be doing is we need to be getting in every CBA that if a UAW member is qualified to do this job, that they take priority. That way, if there is a disruption, for example, there's with the plant one, with all the EV batteries right now, lost over 1,000 UAW members. Well, we need to have job placement so that we could take those 1,000 UAW members and then move them to a different field that has jobs if they're qualified. That way we can keep people in the UAW family and keep our power. The way it stands right now, it's like if you get laid off, it's like, bye, see ya, you're no longer a UAW member. I think that's wrong. The other thing that we need to be doing is working on job training. I spoke briefly about job placement, but we also need to be getting in industries that's creating AI. So for me, I think getting into the energy sector where they're not only producing energy, but now they're making like small nuclear reactors where they put them in parallel to power these big AI data centers and stuff. So those are the industries that we need to be moving in. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it that, you're going to have a job for 30 years. More than likely, that's probably not going to happen, whether you're going to move to a different field or you're going to be laid off due to job impacts. And so right now, what I see the UAW doing is, they're talking about, we want traditional pensions or we want, healthcare and all this other stuff. And I can see these companies agreeing to it because they know they're going to lay you off and replace you with a machine and a robot. So why have that fight now? I'll just lay you off in the future and I still don't have to pay it. So, fighting for things like getting traditional 401ks for all of our members and then getting an additional, 7% match with an additional 7% to pay for healthcare and retirement instead of trying to fight these big fights about traditional pension models and stuff. I mean, I don't think they work. I mean, 2008, if anything, proved that. And the traditional pension came out of a time when we didn't have a 401k or a Roth IRA. I mean, those came later in the 70s and 90s. So, trying to fight this century's problems with last century's playbook, I think is a mistake. But for me, I think, it's about, realizing that, the jobs we have today, if you look at 1940, 60% of jobs that were available then aren't available now, just because things have changed. And, back in the day, they used to have guys go out and they'd pluck ice in the winter, right, to act as your refrigerator. And then they had refrigerators, right? And for me, it's not that job went away. It just changed. Instead of being an ice cutter, I became a refrigerator maker, right? And so getting in these areas, at the local level, like getting involved at local trade schools, setting up internships and apprenticeships for people so we can grow our union, I think is very vital, and trying to be proactive to bring jobs back to America, whatever that way it could be, whether that's partnering with local communities, recognizing that we have a great workforce here that can build something, right? And what could that something be? And to work with the administration to bring back jobs to America so we all win.
What is UAW Cares and how does this lead to your overall vision for the UAW?
So UAW Cares is a healthcare plan for all members in good standing. And so my initial thought was, I hear our retirees all the time talking about, they need help or, they need more out of their pension. Well, I don't know. I can't say, yes, we're going to do that, right? Because that comes in contract negotiations. Does the unions that are there, are they going to do that? Are they going to fight for that, right? Are they going to go on strike so you can have a greater pension? I'm not going to commit to that. But what I do know is that if we come together and we use our collective buying power, we can help lower the cost of healthcare. As we all know, healthcare costs are going through the roof. And so if we come together and do that, that's something that's a tangible goal that we can do with my initial assessment and understanding of the law, help lower our healthcare costs for our retirees and put actual money in their pockets. But the greater vision is that we would eventually roll this out to every local so that everyone buys into the UAW Cares program. And the more that we buy in, the more our costs drop down so that, we work for General Dynamics. We have like the best healthcare in the world. We are blessed and we are lucky for that. But, some of the guys, eyes down at the strike for GE, they're paying upwards of $12,000 a year out of pocket for healthcare costs. mean, $12,000. That's absurd. And so if we could offer the same great healthcare we can as something that's tangible with reasonable cost, I think that's something that would be a great incentive. And if we roll this out and we do it right, this can be the incentive for when we go to right to work states to get people to want to be a UAW member, because you're going to have the best healthcare in the world at a reasonable cost. And the only way you can get it is if you're a dues paying member. I foresee companies of workers that are going to want to reach out to us and become union members. And, we can sit here and spend all our political capital fighting against right to work and say it's wrong and all this other stuff. But I also believe in choices. And if you give a bigger incentive as for people to want to be part of your union than not, I think that's going to actually increase our membership and increase our solidarity and bring us all together, because these people are choosing to be a dues paying member instead of, I'm forced in and whatnot. So I think this will help strengthen the long-term survivability of our union and use this as the major incentive to grow our union, because as we all know, healthcare costs is absurd right now.
What challenges do you think are most important affecting our members, and what is your solution to overcome these challenges?
So for me, the challenges that I see, right now the UAW is fighting all these identity politics, and they're taking, a fight that's going on in New York City or Detroit or in these places, and they're trying to make it nationwide issues. And part of my vision for the UAW, I call it messaging, that the morals and values that someone has in New York City are probably going to be different than someone that lives in Lima, Ohio, or Alabama, or Georgia and stuff. And when we bring these local and regional problems nationally, we're alienating people that, we're helping to recruit. And so I think it's important that, one, we fix our messaging issue and recognize who our current membership is, but who our potential membership could be, and stick to a message that doesn't alienate one side or the other, right? I think that we need to be getting our politics down at the regional and local level. That way we have the political will and the political clout to fight the big things that are facing our members. That's first and foremost. Second, that I think our membership is facing is, we've talked about AI, which is coming, and pushing back against that. If we have a generation of young people that are aggravated with no purpose, I don't think that's going to end well for all of us, right? And so it's important. I think work is a gift from God. It gives us purpose. It gives me something to do. And so we need to be pushing back against that stuff. And part of my big vision when it comes to like AI and these other things is actually changing the law for how corporations act. So a little bit of a history lesson. In 1919, the Dodge brothers sued Henry Ford. So Henry Ford, he had, all these dividend payments to pay out. Well, he wanted to take and reinvest that money into infrastructure and to pay higher wages to help reduce turnover, right? You get paid more money, people's less likely to quit. Well, the Dodge brothers, they wanted their dividend payments. And so they went to court, and I believe it's the Michigan Supreme Court ruled that, companies have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. And so, we talk about corporate greed and all this other stuff. Well, it's part of codified in the law. And so I think that we need to be pushing so that companies, yes, you have a fiduciary duty, but you got to think more in a quarter at a time, right? Because they'll sell everything to have a big quarter and then bankrupt the company in the future. And so I believe that we need to be pushing for reforms so that companies are forced to take all stakeholders into account, not just shareholders, right? That they need to be looking at 5 and 10-year metrics for their business, and not just 1 year at a time and sell everything to hit a stock high so they can pad their pockets. The other thing that I think is facing UAW members, we're having a housing crisis. So right now we're not making enough houses. So people, they're having to go out and buy. And then you have companies like Buy Rockets coming in and buying up all the houses. So say you do find a house and you do a bid, they're doubling the price to take you out of the market. And so we got to get that fixed, because what's going to happen when all of our parents, they own like 70% of the houses, the boomer generation, when they start dying off, and now we have a flood of all these houses hitting the market. Before, that's how you built your wealth, was in equity. Well, I don't know how that's going to happen anymore when we're not building enough houses to keep up with demand. So everyone's paying more. They don't own anything. And then the market's going to be flooded by all these houses because their parents and stuff they die, they sell off. And so all that equity that Americans have built is going to go away. And lastly, the next crisis that I see that our union members is facing is that America is in population decline. And so the way it was before is, you had the older people up top, and then we kept getting bigger and bigger. So the younger people, there's always more of us to help support the older people. Well, now that's in reverse. We have a lot of people that's just hitting retirement age, with the boomers and whatnot. And now we have less and less workers to support that. It's not sustainable. It's like putting a pyramid upside down. Eventually, that's going to collapse. And the other reason why we need to care about that is our economy is based off of consumerism. So if there's less people buying stuff, that's going to affect how, our future work. If we don't sell as many cars because there's less people, well, that's going to have an impact in the car market. And so when we're sitting here fighting for, traditional pensions, when the probability of you working somewhere for 30 years anymore is not very likely, I think that's a recipe for failure. And so that's why I'm pushing back against this stuff, because our union's not talking about this, population decline, housing, AI, all these things that are affecting us. They just get up and they give lip service, and, they're just a propaganda wing of the Democrat Party, and they're not doing anything. They're just like our politicians. They don't do anything. You got the Democrats and Republicans, and they just, go back and forth and nothing gets done. So, there's got to be change, and someone that understands what's actually facing America instead of just getting up, reading the headline because it sounds cool.
Well, you kind of touched on this, but our country and our union is so divided right now. How would you lead to unify UAW members?
I think first and foremost, our politics is dividing us. And so not every issue has to be regional or local issue. It has to be at the national level, right? If, you're picking the governor of Michigan, what does that honestly have to do with Ohio, right? Picking and choosing our battles is important. And I think instead of always having to pick a side to the left or right or whatever, because all we're doing is alienating our members, but ultimately our goal is for what's best for our membership, not for a political ideology. I would like to see right now with our endorsements for political campaigns, it goes through our CAP councils, they all get together and they decide who the UAW endorses, but I don't think that's really representing our membership. I would like to see that the CAP councils go through, they pull the information, and then they give that information to the local, and then the local votes collectively on who that local endorses or not. And then the votes are tallied, each local gets one vote, and that's how our political candidates are chosen. I don't think the voice of the common worker is being heard right now. The other reason why I think this is important is, we have a lot of candidates that the CAP Council, we send out our 40-page questionnaire. Well, if you haven't endorsed me in the past, why would I take the time to endorse it now and fill it out? Because I would probably assume that you're not going to endorse me. So if I fill out your 40-page questionnaire, I'm just wasting my time. And so I think that's the other reason is, we're alienating one side of the political spectrum, when the truth is, for us to get these changes made that we need to better our union, we need both sides to get the agenda across. And so only picking the fights and fighting the battles that affect our membership directly as a whole, instead of, cherry picking these battles for political clout.
Okay, finally, Greg, for UAW members hearing about you for the first time, what core message would you want them to know about why you're running to bring real change to the International UAW?
I'm not running for political clout. I'm not running to better myself, finances. I'm paying for my campaign myself. But I want our membership to know that our best days are ahead of us, not behind us. That just because our future is a little murky right now doesn't mean that we are not going to be successful on the other end. That, there are ideas and ways that we can better our lives, that we can, help with healthcare and do these other things that we talk about where nothing's being done. But we got to come together collectively and put politics aside and decide, what do we want the UAW to be? Do we want to be a propaganda wing for the Democrat Party, or do we want our membership to win and be successful? I mean, that's a choice that we have to decide right now. What made the UAW great years ago with Walter Reuther is that they unified together as a group collectively with one voice to make positive change in America. And since the passing of the Walter Reuther generation, we've had nothing but managers at the helm of the UAW, and it shows. I mean, you see it at your work. After 50 years of managers, what gets done? What bureaucracy is there? And there's a statement or a verse from the Bible in Proverbs that says, where there's no vision, the people perish. And that's so true. The UAW hasn't had vision for the past 50 years, since the passing of the Walter Reuther generation. And we've been in steady decline. And so we need people with new, fresh ideas, not trying to use last century's playbook for this century's problems, that understand what challenges Americans are facing in our workforce and have some type of semblance that can come up with a plan to push back against it, and also be willing to say, hey, this isn't working. We got to come up with a plan B, and put their pride aside to do what's best for the membership. Sometimes the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And we need someone that's a servant leader, that's willing to do what it takes to lead our union instead of just making it all about me. I'd ask all of you, if you would, send me your questions, go to mooneyforpresident.com, check out my campaign, see what I'm all about, and, let's do this together. So.
Okay, Greg, thank you for your honesty and your commitment. UAW family, if Greg's message of strength, transparency, and member first leadership resonates with you, please visit mooneyforpresident.com right now. Learn more about his platform, sign up, get involved, and help build the future our union deserves. In solidarity, let's make 2026 the year we take power back. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Greg, thank you.
Thank you.